There's another look at Padre Island, Texas from last week. Thank you very much to Greg for that footage. Let's take a look at the weather map for this afternoon. Looks about the same as what we had on Wednesday. Stationary front through the central and Midwest region. And even in the western states, the front is pretty much in the same place. Cool air flowing down through the San Joaquin Valley, temperatures in the 70s, very nice day. And the dry line. Yeah, that typically loses definition. We find it somewhere in New Mexico and Arizona. But for today, lots of dry air covering that part of the country. And so the dry line found right there around Roswell and El Paso. Now, the weather has been a little bit unusual up in Alaska. Let's take a look. And more specifically, talking about the Northwest Territories. Alaska looks kind of normal right now. But in the Northwest Territories, we've got low pressure in northern Yukon, and that's brought some downslope conditions off of these mountains here on the Yukon Northwest Territories border. That means adiabatic warming, warm air advection from southern latitudes, and warm conditions. Let's take a look at the map yesterday. Yep, there you go, 90 degrees at Inuvik. Is that a record? Well, not really. 91 degrees, both in June and July. Those were observed in 1999 and 2001. But nevertheless, it is pretty close. Around Fairbanks, 80 degrees. And we'll check out the Canadian High Arctic. And there we get into a colder air mass regime, 55 at Eureka. And for Eureka, we need to see it up near 70 degrees to break a record. So probably a repeat for today. Temperatures at least in the 80s. And then out in the eastern part of Canada, cooler air in place, 30s and 40s. And there goes an outgoing occlusion heading into the Maritimes. SPC looking at a slight risk in Kentucky. Little MCS moving through the Ohio River region, and a slight risk in Montana. The radar as we record this indicating a classic MCS, not severe, but numerous cells along a common boundary, and back behind it there's the cold pool driving this convection. A cross-section through a complex like this will look about as pictured here. The surface map will show a boundary that will be the gust front or the outflow boundary. As you go north of that, you get into the precip filled area, cooler conditions. And then as you go further back into the cell, you'll get back into the wake low. We haven't really covered that very much, but often there will be a trough trailing these weather systems. Now, the higher reflectivities will be found right in this region here. That's where your hail and high wind are found. Further back in the MCS, you'll have a trailing stratiform region. Now, on a day like this, that's mostly just going to be light rain and some rumbles of thunder, but in more active MCS complexes, there can be some very spectacular lightning back in this area. And the rear inflow jet will also tend to get started back in that trailing stratiform region, and that'll be brought down to the surface and help pick up the wind gusts near the outflow boundary. Anyway, there's the updraft, and you can see the terraced, scalloped shelf clouds. We saw some spectacular examples of that earlier this week in South Dakota and Iowa. And some of your mammatus will be found here and sometimes in the trailing stratiform region as well. So using today's weather, let's do a quick cross-section. I'm going to go from the northwest around Cincinnati down to about Jackson. We'll cut right through the MCS like that and zoom in. Now keep in mind that this does not really detect the clouds. It does not detect the anvil very well. This is more sensitive to precipitation, rain, graupel, hail, that kind of thing. And we zoom in and we can see mostly a lot of rain, maybe a little bit of small hail mixed in. So the actual cloud material may be running something like that right there. Certainly some overshooting tops possible over the heavier stuff, and then it kind of trails back like that. So that is the trailing stratiform region. It's showing a bit of a bright band up there at about 15,000 feet. That is going to be the melting level. So up above we have snow, ice crystals falling into this warmer layer, and it becomes coated with water. It becomes more sensitive to the radar, and we pick up higher reflectivity right there. And that does tend to be an area where we get a little bit of in-cloud lightning. But of course, the heavier stuff out towards the southeast. Out there in Arizona and New Mexico, not much to see. Some artifacts showing up on the Tucson radar. We see beam blocking from the surrounding mountains. That cuts out these pie-shaped wedges. That's blocking. And we also see some ground clutter. Right there, that's going to be Mount Lemmon up to the north. And if we animate that, it doesn't move. We do see patterns like that on the Great Plains, but those come from wind farms. And there's a prominent example on the Frederick radar around Vernon, Texas. Yeah, those are going to be wind turbines showing up on the radar plots. And if we go closer to the radar, we can see other artifacts in that area. Let's switch over to spectrum width. And what we see here is power lines, and sometimes you'll pick up vehicles. But the density of this, that would indicate a continuous artifact, and that would be a power line. There's one near Loveland, Oklahoma, and there's another set of power lines up there north of Frederick. And you will pick up traffic from time to time. You have to go to the busier interstates for that. Here's an example in Albuquerque right now as we record this. The radar site located on the western side of the valley cuts across the Rio Grande into the east side of Albuquerque there. And that's where it's hitting the terrain. There's mountains located right here. These are the foothills. And it looks like we're actually picking up some of the busier traffic on these roads out in eastern Albuquerque. Well, not much going on in that part of the country. It's already mid-afternoon, just barely starting to get some showers going up on the Mogollon Rim. But earlier today, looks like an outflow boundary surged south through the Roswell and Alamogordo area, and you can see back behind it some impressive gravity waves. Let's run that through. You can see that taking place right there, so some dynamic stuff in the sky in that part of the country. Some showers are going up around Taos and Raton, and much of the central Rockies also getting some showers and thunderstorms forming at this hour. But look at Utah, it's completely clear. So that monsoon activity has really ramped down in the past couple of days. So this is a good time to take a look at the upper level winds. The jet stream, that's the first thing we need to analyze. Runs about like that, comes onto the west coast, flows up around the ridge into the Canadian prairies, and then into the northeastern states. Down to the south, subtropical high across Florida into southern Alabama, and then it looks like maybe another high out across Yuma right there. You can see the clockwise flow around that high. So that's helping to keep things shut down. And really to support the monsoon, we need a deep southerly flow through the atmosphere. Doesn't look like that. Looks like the winds are light and variable or out of the north across that part of Arizona and New Mexico. So that's not conducive to monsoon conditions, and the monsoon moisture is down here being carried to the west. So any change in that, let's take a look. Going forward into the 10th and 11th, into this weekend, looks like a lot of upper level high pressure across Texas, some southerly flows starting to show up in Arizona, but they're under the influence of those prevailing westerlies. That trough dipping south a little bit, helping to pick up the winds in the Great Basin region. Going forward into Next week, 12th and 13th, well, it looks like that high pressure is locked in across Arizona. That doesn't always rule out thunderstorm activity, but that is usually a guarantee of very hot conditions. Some northwesterly flow starting to show up in the central U.S. that can be associated with northwest flow storms. Go forward a little bit further into next week, 14th and 15th. Well, that high is locked right in across the central Rockies. May start to see the appearance of wildfire conditions in the central Rockies. Meanwhile, northerly flow, that's going to increase the chances of rain in the south and southeastern U.S. Part of that is due to differential advection. You get the cooler air in the upper levels flowing over the warm, moist air. That increases the instability. You've also got stronger winds aloft helping to shear the storms, and also these boundaries sinking south and firming up the convergence. And then going to the end of the period, 18th and 19th, high across the central U.S., so this area is going to be quite hot. But down to the south, strong easterly flow. Look at that, 45 knots out of the east in Dallas. So the weather is going to be somewhat tropical, although I think there is going to be a boundary kind of stationary through the Gulf Coast region. And out on the west coast, it looks like a trough coming on shore, but that's still quite a few days away. All right, let's see how our temperature records are shaping up. 103 expected at Memphis, which will break the record set 42 years ago, and 105 at Waco, 105 at San Angelo. For tomorrow, more of the same, 107 at Waco, and we're expecting 105 in Dallas. Also some hot weather showing up in the Central Rockies, 102 at Salt Lake City, and 98 at Denver, both of those tie-in records for the date. For Sunday, our focus shifts back to Texas. 102 at Houston, 105 at Austin, and 105 at San Antonio. Texas continues to suffer on Monday, looking at 105 at Waco, 106 at Abilene. For Tuesday, with that upper-level high shifting up towards the Central Plains, looks like Texas gets a break, 102 at San Antonio, but some hot weather showing up around Boston. For Wednesday, I think we're going to start seeing more records showing up in this part of the country. This is still pretty early, so the forecasts are biased towards climatology, but still 100 being forecast in southern Idaho. And for Thursday, that's a little ways off, but no records being indicated at this time. What a great time to look at the Extreme Forecast Index from the ECMWF model. This is last night's forecast of today. So they're forecasting a hot day across much of the southern U.S., and there's that rain we were looking at earlier, above average precip. Going into tomorrow, looks like a lot of the rainy weather shifts into Virginia and Maryland. Hot weather in the southern U.S. once again. You can see a little bit of heat also building in Wyoming. For Sunday, hot weather in those same areas, and some of the rain also working its way south into the Carolinas as that boundary shifts to the south. For Monday, hot weather digging right into Texas. And then for Tuesday, not much change. A little bit of wind indicated in the northeastern U.S. There's midweek. Heat starting to show up in the Canadian prairies as well as in the Great Basin region. I kind of wonder about this, and I need to take a look at that in just a minute. And there's Thursday. Hot in the northern plains and in Texas. Yeah, got to check out that Arctic area. There's that heat up there in the northern part of Canada for today. Looks like more of the same for tomorrow, also warm in Alaska. Sunday, looking at the same. Monday. Tuesday. This is a very stagnant pattern. Wednesday. Thursday. Yeah, I guess the Inuit people, the First Nations people up there, are not liking that they're probably not acclimated to 70s and 80s. And very likely, yeah, probably 80s around this region and 70s in the southern Arctic. And that's all for this edition of Forecast Lab. I will let you know that I am probably going to take my summer break next week. Very likely we're going to have one break every season, so if I go ahead and do that, we'll be back the following week. In closing, I want to share this post from Jesse Newsom. He posted his Morton, Texas tornado chase from May. I'll put up a link here so y'all can check it out. He says on his downtime, he was reading some of my books that he took with him. And he says, thanks for the great content, Tim. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Jesse. And of course, thanks to our Patreon supporters, people like Christopher Kane, Brian Haggerty, Ryan, Stephen Kondrak, Jacob McMillan. Thank you all for helping to support the program. I do appreciate it. Anyway, we'll see you all next week or the week after, one of the two. And if there's anything really unusual like a hurricane or a derecho, I'll probably do a special edition and we'll check that out. Anyway, we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.